We all have a story about the day we were born. But what if the story everyone told you wasn't the whole story? What if the real one was this secret memory, something only you knew, that kind of colored your entire world? Well, today, we're diving into the birth of a princess who wasn't born out of love, but from a fire of pure, unadulterated vengeance.
Yeah, she had these heroic names she'd make up for herself, like Offspring of Vengeance. Sounds pretty cool, right? But it was her nurse, Daima, who gave her the nickname that really stuck, the one that probably cut a little too close to the truth. The girl who wasn't invited.
And in those long, lonely years of her childhood, this story of her birth was the one thing she'd ask for, over and over again. Because you see, it was the only story that made her feel special, in a life that was otherwise pretty isolating. Just picture it. This young princess stuck in a gloomy room in this suffocating palace, listening to her nurse. And as Daima shelled peas, her hands moving like lightning, she'd spin the tale of how an entire kingdom basically held its breath waiting, not for a normal royal baby, but for a savior to literally walk out of a sacrificial fire.
Now this prayer, it wasn't about love or family or continuing the royal line. Nope. Her father, King Drupad, was praying for a weapon. His heart was completely consumed by one single thought, getting revenge on his archenemy, Drona. And the scale of this whole operation was just staggering. For 30 straight days, the entire court had to fast and pray, 100 priests chanting nonstop, all of it fueled by the king's white-hot hatred. This wasn't a religious ceremony, it was an obsession made real.
Daima's description of the king is absolutely chilling. A man so thin you could count his bones, basically hollowed out by his own rage. The only thing keeping him alive was this burning desire for revenge. He wasn't really a father, he was an idea, a walking, talking symbol of vengeance. And then, on that final day, it happened. As the very last offering was poured into the flames, these voices spoke from the thick, black smoke. They told the king, "Okay, you got it." But they gave him this terrible warning. This victory you want so badly, it's going to cost you everything. So, did the king even flinch? Did he hesitate? Not for a second. He just accepted the dark deal, no questions asked. And in that exact moment, the son he had prayed for, the living weapon for his revenge, stepped right out of the fire. And what a sight he must have been. He was just perfect. A true prince, looking about 5 years old, so noble, tall, completely unafraid. He was born ready to do the very grim job his father had created him for. But then, bam! Just as the crowd started cheering for their new prince, she appeared. Stumbling out of the smoke, grabbing for her brother's hand, she was dark where he was fair, hasty where he was calm, the complete, total, unexpected opposite of the son everyone was waiting for. So there they are, these two fire-born children, holding on to each other for dear life. And the mysterious voices from the smoke, they come back. But this time, they've got a message specifically for the girl he never even asked for. They called her a gift, a world changer, and for just one tiny fleeting moment, her father, the king, actually smiled. It looked like, maybe, just maybe, he understood her value, her incredible destiny. But the truth often comes out in the little details, like the names he picked. For his son, he chose Dristadumna, which means destroyer of enemies, a name with power, with purpose. And for his daughter, Draupadi, which just means daughter of Drupad. That's it. Her whole identity was just being his. And this is where the happy story ends. Because there's this memory that just eats at her, a truth that Daima's cheerful tale of feast and prophecies could never ever touch. Before any prophecies, before any cheering, there was just a cold hall that smelled like incense and old, old hatred. And there she was, holding her brother's hand, as this gaunt, glittering man walked right towards them. Her father. This is the moment, the heartbreaking, crucial moment. He held out his arms, but only for his son. It was only my brother that he wanted. The only reason he was forced to pick them both up is because they clung to each other so fiercely he couldn't separate them. And you can bet she never, ever forgot that. That one moment of hesitation. He could give her palaces and jewels, the duties of a princess, even things that looked like affection. But nothing could ever erase the sting of that very first silent rejection. So, what do you do with that? How is a girl who's supposed to change the course of history meant to even start her journey when she's basically locked away, a prisoner in her own home?
She saw the palace as a perfect reflection of her father's mind, a fortress. It was severe, practical, and had zero beauty. No trees because they were a security risk, no flowers because they had no use. It wasn't a home, it was a tomb. The one bright spot in this grim, gray world was her brother. He was the one person who, from that very first second, refused to let go of her hand. They were inseparable, kind of shielding each other from a world that saw them as, well, not quite normal. And that leaves us with this huge final question, right? She would lie awake at night, thinking about that prophecy, with this mix of desperate yearning and pure terror. If the universe tells you you're destined for greatness, but then locks you in a cage with no tools and no power, where on earth do you even begin? How does history ever find you?